Good evening, everyone. In 1915, the heart of South Australia's outback sweltered like a steam room. 14-year-old Willie Hutchinson was on his way to bring water to his father, a gold prospector, when his foot accidentally kicked a stone by the roadside. The stone tumbled, glinting with an odd radiance in the scorching sun. Willie froze, bent down, and picked it up, finding it unlike any rock he'd ever seen. Within it swirled an indescribable glow, as if a rainbow had been trapped inside. It was an opal, a gemstone that fetched a fortune. This discovery shot across Australia like a signal flare. Word spread, and the gold rush morphed into an opal rush. Thousands flocked to this nameless desert, armed with shovels, tents, and dreams of striking it rich. But they soon faced a deadly problem. In summer, the surface temperature easily soared past 50 degrees Celsius. And so, the truly fascinating part of the story began. Driven to desperation by the blistering sun, people started digging underground, this time not just for mining, but for a peaceful night's sleep. Slowly, the first traces of an underground city took shape beneath the red earth. Now, dim the lights, and let's step into tonight's story, accompanied by the chime of a bell. You stand in Coober Pedy in the 1920s. The sand beneath your feet burns through your shoes. The sun blazes overhead like an angry light bulb, sucking every drop of moisture from your body. You glance up, instantly regretting it. Your eyes sear as if someone has shone a flashlight directly into them. This is summer in Australia's outback. No shade, no clouds, no mercy. Around you are fellow miners, most young men just home from the battlefields of World War I. They'd hoped for a better life back home, only to find an economic depression and no jobs. Their only chance was to head to this desert and dig for opals. They set up tents, but the tents were a joke in this heat, too sweltering to sleep in by day, and by night, the mosquitoes descended in swarms. Some tried dousing the tents with water to cool them down, but the water evaporated faster than they could pour it. Desperation is a creative emotion. One day, a miner finished his shift, too exhausted to climb out of the mine. He leaned against the rock wall and found it wonderfully cool. He lay down and fell asleep, waking up feeling refreshed, as if he'd discovered a new world. The next day, he told his workmates, skeptical but with no better options. A few of them tried sleeping in the mine and found it 1,000,000 times more comfortable than a tent. But there were problems. The mines were carved for digging, twisted and uneven, leaving them sore all over when they lay down. Worse, the ventilation was terrible, growing stuffy after a while. So someone had a thought. What if they dug a hole not for opals, but for living in? It sounded crazy, but in 40-degree heat, crazy ideas felt strangely sensible. And so, the miners took up a curious side job, digging for opals by day, digging for homes by night. The earliest underground dwellings were incredibly simple, just a cave, about 3 meters wide and 5 meters deep, barely big enough for a bed and a chest. No windows, no doors, just a piece of cloth hanging at the entrance for a door. Yet even this shabby cave was far better than a surface tent. It stayed a constant 24 degrees Celsius, dry and quiet, so still not even flies bothered to venture in. Gradually, some hung photos on the rock walls, others laid a rug on the floor, a few even hauled in a rocking chair. Little by little, the feeling of home took root. By the late 1920s, Coober Pedy had dozens of these underground abodes, scattered like an ant nest beneath the red earth. Above ground, the heat raged on below. Someone was already wondering if they should dig an extra room for a living room. You grip a shovel, standing before a reddish-brown rock face. Sunlight slants through the cave entrance, illuminating swirling motes of dust. You take a deep breath and drive the shovel hard into the rock crack. A chunk of earth falls away. It's an afternoon in 1925, and you've decided to dig yourself a proper room. Not a makeshift shelter in a random mine, but a planned, shaped underground bedroom fit for living. Before you start, you do your homework, asking the older miners who already live underground for their rules of thumb. First, don't dig too deep. Too far down, ventilation fails, and you risk suffocation. The ideal depth is 3 to 5 meters, enough to keep the temperature constant and the air flowing. Second, choose the right rock layer. Coober Pedy's geology is unique. A soft layer of red earth on the surface, a hard rock layer below it, and a softer clay layer beneath that. The middle hard layer is perfect for digging sturdy enough that the walls won't collapse, but not so hard it's impossible to cut through. Third, face the entrance south. In the southern hemisphere, a south-facing entrance avoids the harshest sunlight and catches the cool southern breezes. You pick a spot following these rules and start digging. Digging an underground room is both backbreaking work and a skill. You can't hack away like you do for opals. You have to dig layer by layer, like cutting a cake. First, you flatten the top to set the ceiling height, then expand outwards in circles from the top down. Every few feet, you stop to check the rock face. If you spot cracks or loose stone, you prop it up with wood or rocks to reinforce it. You dig for 3 full days, and finally, you have a space about 3 meters wide, 4 meters long, and 2.5 meters high. Standing inside, you feel like you've climbed into a giant clay pot. The walls are uneven curves, marked with shovel strokes. The ceiling arcs slightly, like an upturned bowl. The floor is pitted and needs leveling, but as you stand there a moment, you feel the cool air wrap around you. Above ground, it's a 42-degree inferno, but down here, it's like an air-conditioned room. You even shiver a little. You start moving your things in. First a simple camp bed, then a wooden chest for a nightstand, and finally a kerosene lamp. When you light the lamp, orange light floods the room, softening the texture of the rock walls. You lie on the bed staring up at the stone ceiling, and a strange sense of security washes over you. This is your cave, your home, no matter how crazy the world above gets. Here, you are safe. You close your eyes and the howl of the wind and sand outside fades into the distance. That first shovelful of earth had opened a new world. You open your eyes to total darkness. The kerosene lamp has gone out. Its fuel burned up. You fumble for a match and relight it, and orange light fills the small space once more. You check your pocket watch. 6:30 in the morning. Underground, time stands still. No sunrise, no sunset, no birds chirping outside a window. Without a clock, you'd have no idea how long you'd slept. But this is the best sleep of your life. The cool rock beneath the mattress saps the excess heat from your body. The air is dry and fresh. No trace of the stuffy, moldy smell of the tent. Most of all, it's perfectly quiet. The wind and sand, the chirping insects, the distant bark of a dog, all are blocked out by meters of rock. You stretch, feeling alive again. And then you notice the little things that need fixing. First, the bed. Your canvas camp bed has a metal frame that creaks when you move, and the thin canvas leaves your back sore after a night's sleep. You resolve to find a proper mattress somehow. Second, the light. The kerosene lamp works, but its light is dim and smoky. You can already see a black smudge on the wall. Over time, the whole room would be stained with soot. You've heard some people use candles. They're cleaner, but more expensive. Third, the ventilation. Even in this small room, the air grows stuffy after a while. You need to improve the entrance to let the air circulate better. You start slowly transforming your little nest. First, the floor. You smooth out the pitted rock with fine sand. Then lay down an old red rug you bought in town, faded at the edges, but it instantly makes the room feel warmer. Then the walls. On the most prominent wall, you hang a photo, a family portrait your mother sent you. Next to it, a small mirror for shaving and combing your hair, fogged a little, but usable in candlelight. You hang a thick canvas curtain at the entrance, dark blue with a few hand-sewn patches. Your stitches are messy, but they hold. It blocks out the dust and light and gives you a little privacy. Finally, you set a small wooden chest by the bed, filled with your most precious things. A few letters from home, a tattered Bible, a harmonica your grandfather left you, and the few opal ruffs you saved up. You lie on your new mattress, read a letter for a while, play a little on the harmonica. The kerosene lamp's light dances on the rock walls, casting warm shadows, and you suddenly realize this cave is more than just a place to sleep. It's your home. You finish tidying the room and lift the canvas curtain at the entrance. There's a man standing outside your neighbor, old Mike. His home is about 20 meters next to yours. Old Mike grins. Morning, sleep well. Great, you reply. You. Best sleep of my life. He nods at his cave entrance. Come round sometime. I dug a new room yesterday. Want your opinion? You nod and follow him. Old Mike's place is a little bigger. He got here earlier and spent more time digging, and now he has 2 connected rooms, one for sleeping, one for a living room. The living room is just a slightly wider space with 2 chairs and a small table. "Look at this shelf I put up," old Mike says proudly, pointing at a row of wooden shelves on the wall. "Perfect for books, mugs, tools." You look closely, the shelves are set right into the rock. Old Mike chiseled holes in the wall, slid the planks in, and sealed the gaps with mud. Simple, but sturdy. "Nice work," you say sincerely. Just then, another neighbor arrives, Big Beard Tom, who lives on the other side of old Mike. He's carrying a pot of freshly brewed tea, still steaming. "Scaman, lads, try this new tea from town," says it's from Ceylon. The 3 of you sit in the underground living room, sipping hot tea and chatting. Who found a good opal yesterday? New faces in town. When the next supply ship will arrive? And you suddenly realize this is no longer just a collection of isolated caves. It's a community. By the late 1920s, over 100 people live underground in Coober Pedy. Their caves scattered like a beehive below the surface, some close together, some a little farther apart. Above ground, it's a barren red wasteland. A live little world hums with life. People even start naming their caves. "This is my sunset cottage," a romantic young man says, even though no sunset is ever seen inside. "I call mine the cool retreat," a down-to-earth middle-aged man says. "Fitting, for it's always cool." "Mine's the fortune den," an optimistic old miner laughs. "Haven't struck it rich yet, but a man's got a dream." You finish your tea, say goodbye to the neighbors, and head out to mine. Stepping out of old Mike's cave, you see a few more people digging new holes in the distance. The fooring clink clink fooring ford of shovels, hitting rock echoes all around. A strange symphony. This underground city is growing, one shovelful at a time. You've made a bit of money, not a fortune, but more than you usually earn. Last week you found a high-quality opal in the mine and sold it to a passing buyer for nearly 3 months' wages. You decide to use the money to buy something for your home. You stand in the only store in town, a jumble of supplies, tinned food, flour, kerosene, tools, cloth, everything is there, but most things are outrageously expensive. The nearest city is over 800 kilometers away, and shipping costs are crippling. Your eyes land on a set of furniture in the corner, a solid-looking wooden table, 4 matching chairs, and a small chest of drawers. "How much for this?" you ask the shopkeeper. He names a price that makes your head spin, enough to buy 3 months' worth of tinned food. "Too expensive," you shake your head and turn to leave. "Wait," the shopkeeper calls after you. "You're a miner, right? Got any good opals? We can barter." You pause. Bartering is common in Coober Pedy. Cash is useless here. The nearest bank is miles away, and few people carry much of it. But opals are different. They're both currency and a commodity. A good opal holds its value, is easy to carry, and can be sold any time. You pull another rough opal from your pocket. Not the best quality, but it has a lovely play of color, flashing blue and green in the light. The shopkeeper takes it, squints at it, holds it up to the sun and twists it around. "This'll get you the table and 2 chairs," he says. "3 chairs, you bargain. 2.5, 2.5, 2 whole ones, plus 1 with a broken leg. You fix it yourself." You think for a moment and nod. It's a deal. And just like that, you trade an opal for your first proper set of furniture. 1 chair needs fixing, but it's better than nothing. You carry the furniture home and figure out how to arrange it. The table in the middle of the living room, the 2 whole chairs on either side, the broken one propped up with a rock, just about usable. You even let yourself dream. If you find another good opal, you could trade it for a real sofa, the soft kind with a back, the kind you never want to get up from. Old Mike drops by for a visit and gawks at your new furniture. "That table's brilliant," he says, running his hand over the surface. "I want one too. Where'd you find the opal for it?" "Eastern Mine number 3 by that crack you know of." "Really? I'm heading there tomorrow." Old Mike hurries off, excited. You know he'll probably find nothing tomorrow. Opals are scattered at random, no pattern to their whereabouts. But who knows? Luck can be funny that way. You sit in your new chair, sipping tea, and stare at a picture of the sea on the opposite wall. 1 stone, and your home feels like a home. It's a deal well made. The atmosphere inside is strange. Above ground, the desert burns hot enough to melt flesh. Below, this cool sanctuary holds a gentle calm. Candlelight flickers. The air smells faintly of wax, and someone in the corner hums a hymn softly. The priest begins his sermon, his voice deep and steady, echoing in the enclosed space. You don't understand much of what he says. It sounds like Latin, but the rhythm of his words is soothing in itself. Next to you sits a miner you know, Stavros, a Greek man. His eyes are closed. His lips moving slightly, muttering a prayer. After the service, people chat in small groups. You realize the church is more than just a place for worship. It's a social hub. Here you hear news from all over. You hear the chime of a bell, a rare sound in Coober Pedy. There are no bell towers here, no churches, barely any proper buildings at all. Where is it coming from? Curious, you follow the sound to a cave entrance you'd never noticed before. A shabby wooden sign hangs above it, carved with messy letters. Sweet underground church. You bend down and crawl in. It's a far larger space than the ordinary dwellings, about 10 meters long, 7 or 8 meters wide, and 3 meters high. The ceiling arcs like the bottom of an upturned boat. Rows of niches are chiseled into the walls, each holding a candle, burning quietly. At the front is a simple altar, carved from rock, draped with a white cloth and topped with a wooden cross. Next to the altar stands a man in a black robe, a priest, ringing a small brass bell. Dozens of people sit on stone stools, heads bowed, praying silently. You slip into a seat and join them in silence. This is Coober Pedy's first underground church. built sometime in the late 1920s. No one knows for sure who started it. Some say a group of Catholics, others Serbian Orthodox Christians. A few even say a devout old miner who dug it out by himself over months, found an opal in which mine who's had a new baby, who's heading back home next month. Someone hands you a cup of tea. There's a tiny tea room at the back of the church, also carved from rock. Stavros claps you on the shoulder. Mass every Sunday morning. You can come any time though. It's nice and cool here. You're not a particularly devout person, but this place fills you with a quiet peace. You step out of the church, and the sun's glare stings your eyes, but your heart feels light-filled with peace, or hope, or just the warmth of a cup of tea shared with neighbors. A new neighbor has moved in, a miner named Pietro from Sicily in Italy. He lives 2 caves down from you, and every morning when he heads out, he shouts something at you that sounds like "Buongiorno." You have no idea what it means until someone tells you it's Italian for "good morning." Pietro didn't come alone. He brought his whole family, 2 brothers, a cousin, and an old man who's supposedly his uncle. Together, they dug a huge underground dwelling with 7 or 8 rooms, a mansion by Coober Pedy standards. This is common here. Coober Pedy was never a one-nation town. On the contrary, it's probably one of the most diverse towns in Australia. You count the people you know and realize they're from more than a dozen countries. Greeks are the most numerous, coming in groups. They say there's a tradition of opal mining in southern Greece. There are plenty of Serbs too, most fleeing the unrest in their homeland. After World War I, Italians come from all over: Sicily, Naples, Tuscany. Their dialects are so different, sometimes they can't even understand each other. There are Germans, Poles, Croatians, Slovenians. At its peak, Coober Pedy's residents came from over 50 countries and regions. For a town of just over 2,000 people, it's probably one of the most ethnically diverse places on Earth, per capita. This diversity brings wonderful things. Walk down the street and you'll hear a dozen different languages. Sometimes a group of people chat, switching between 3 languages in a single sentence. Outsiders have no idea what they're saying. Then there's the food. Italians brought pasta and olive oil, Greeks lamb and feta cheese, Serbs cured meat and potato flatbread. You're of English descent, but your eating habits have completely changed. You now have Greek yogurt for breakfast, Italian meat sauce pasta for lunch, and Serbian stew for dinner. And the religion. Besides the Catholic church you visited, there's an Orthodox church, a Serbian Orthodox church, even a tiny underground mosque. People of different faiths live in peace, sometimes even attending each other's religious events. You can celebrate Christmas twice a year here. The 25th of December for the Western Church, the 7th of January for the Orthodox. There's Greek Easter, Italian Carnival, and countless other ethnic festivals you can't name. On those days, the caves ring with laughter and song, and the air is filled with the smell of delicious food. But diversity has its troubles, and language barriers are the biggest. Sometimes 2 people argue, not out of hatred, but simply because they don't understand each other, and a misunderstanding grows. Doing business can be hard too. You have to bargain with hand gestures and drawings. Slowly, a strange mixed language emerged based on English, but mixed with words and grammar from all the other languages spoken here. Only the locals can understand it. You shout a clumsy buongiorno at Pietro in Italian. He freezes for a moment, then bursts out laughing and replies with something that might be a compliment or a joke. Either way, you become friends. After a few years living underground, you realize one bedroom and one living room aren't enough. You need a proper kitchen. Right now, you cook in a corner of the living room, and the soot has blackened the walls. You need a storage room too. Your things are piling up everywhere. If you could, a small bathroom would be perfect. You start figuring out how to plan the space of your underground home. First, the kitchen. It needs the best ventilation, cooking, boiling water. Baking all create lots of smoke and steam. Without good ventilation, the whole house would turn into a soot-stained mess. You watch how your neighbors have set up their kitchens, and the smartest design is clear. Put the kitchen closest to the entrance, so the smoke drifts straight out. No swirling around the rooms. Some people even chisel a chimney straight up from the kitchen to the surface, so the smoke rises with the hot air and dissipates outside. The storage room has its own rules. Dig it deeper into the rock. The farther down you go, the more stable the temperature, perfect for storing food and heat-sensitive things. Some miners dig a small cellar in their storage rooms, a meter deeper than the rest of the house, where the temperature is 2 or 3 degrees cooler, like a natural refrigerator. The bathroom is the hardest part. One of the biggest problems with underground living is drainage. Where do you put the water? There are no sewers, no septic tanks. You can't just pour water on the rock. The early solution was primitive. Bathe with a bucket. Carry the dirty water outside. The toilet was a bucket too, emptied at a designated public dump when full. It was inconvenient, but there was no better option. Then someone invented an evaporation pit system. Dig a shallow hole on the surface outside the cave. Line it with a waterproof sheet and pour the wastewater in. Evaporation in the Australian outback is lightning fast. A bucket of water dries up in a few hours. It's a hassle, but it solves the drainage problem at last. You spend about 3 months expanding your home from 2 rooms to 5. A bedroom, a living room, a kitchen, a storage room, and a small washroom with a bucket, a mirror, and a basin, just enough for your daily washing and cleaning. You chisel narrow, low corridors connecting the rooms. They save energy to dig and act as partitions too. Your proudest spot is the storage room. You chisel rows of shelves along the walls, filled with tinned food, flour, salt, sugar, tea, and a few bottles of whiskey you're saving for a special occasion. In the corner, a small cellar holds a few blocks of cheese and some cured meat. Not a real refrigerator, but it works. You stand in your new home, looking around. You dug all 5 rooms with your own 2 hands, one shovelful at a time. You get a dog, a mixed breed with dusty yellow fur, medium-sized. The man who sold him to you says he's part border collie, part something unknown. You name him Wooer because the first day he came to your home, he tried to dig a hole in your underground living room floor. Keeping a pet underground is far more complicated than you thought. First, the light. Dogs need sunlight, just like people do. Living in constant darkness messes with their mood and health. So every day, you have to take Wooer up to the surface for a walk. Let him sunbathe, run around, chase the wild rabbits that pop up out of nowhere. But the surface is far too hot in the middle of the day, so you only go out early in the morning or late in the evening when the sun is low or gone. Second, the food. There are no pet shops here, no dog food, no vets. Wooer eats your leftovers, rice, broth, bones, the occasional vegetable. You're not sure if it's the right diet, but he looks healthy. His fur is shiny, and he runs like the wind. Wooer adapts to underground life quickly. He has his own little bed in the corner of your bedroom, an old rug laid in a shallow hole chiseled from the rock. He learns to move in the dark, no longer bumping into walls or furniture. He even learns to wait for you at the cave entrance when you go mining, never wandering off. But there's one thing he never learns, not to bark underground. Your cave is only a few meters of rock away from your neighbors, and sound travels through stone faint, but loud enough to hear if he barks hard. Sometimes Wooer barks suddenly in the middle of the night, whether from a bad dream or a strange sound, scaring your neighbors half to death. Your dog was barking again last night, old Mike complains the next day. Thought an earthquake was coming. I'm sorry, you say, over and over. Later, you find a solution. Hang thick blankets around Wooer's bed, a simple sound barrier. It doesn't muffle the sound completely, but it helps a lot. You lie on your bed, Wooer curled up at your feet, his breathing slow and steady, occasionally whimpering softly, chasing something in his dreams. In this isolated underground world, having a warm, living creature by your side feels like a blessing. You hear a strange roar, like 100 trucks rumbling in the distance. But there are no 100 trucks here, barely even one. You jump out of bed, lift the canvas curtain at the entrance, and look out, above ground. The sky has turned an eerie orange-red, as if someone spilled a bucket of paint. Fine dust fills the air, making you cough. The distant horizon has vanished, replaced by a moving wall of red sand. A sandstorm. Sandstorms are a fact of life in the Australian outback, hitting most often in summer. When hot, dry air moves fast, it whips up the surface sand into a huge dust cloud. At its worst, visibility drops to just a few meters, and even breathing is a struggle. On the surface, people are scrambling to save their things, clutching their tents down so the wind doesn't tear them away. Some shout, some run, some huddle on the ground, covering their faces. Chaos reigns, but you let the curtain fall and climb back into bed to sleep. That's the beauty of living underground. Nothing that happens above ground can touch you. Your cave entrance faces south, away from the main wind direction. The thick canvas curtain blocks most of the dust. Even if a little seeps in, it just piles up in a small heap at the entrance, easy to sweep away after the storm. As for the air inside, the vent you chiseled is angled upward, with a simple filter made of a few layers of gauze over the opening. When a sandstorm hits, you just close the cover and the air inside stays clean. The storm rages for about 4 hours. In that time, you drink 3 cups of tea, read half a book, and even take a nap. The world outside roars with fury. Your world is as quiet as another planet. When the storm passes, you step out to check. The surface is a mess. Tent dwellers' belongings are scattered everywhere. Some people digging through the sand to find their pots and pans. A new miner you know stands staring at where his tent used to be. It's gone, blown away to who knows where. "You okay?" You ask him. He shakes his head, bitter smile on his face. "Gotta build a new one." You look at him, then at your cave entrance. You could dig one instead. He freezes for a moment, then nods. You head back to your cave, close the curtain, and sink into the quiet isolation. Sand still swirls outside, but it's no longer your problem. You come home and your cave is lit up, not by a kerosene lamp, not by a candle, but by real electric lights, bright, steady, no flickering. Surprise! Your wife stands at the entrance, eyes crinkling with a smile. "We have electricity." You can hardly believe your eyes. It's a day in the 1960s. You can't remember the exact date, but you'll never forget the shock and excitement. Coober Pedy is finally connected to the power grid, ending decades of candle and kerosene lamplight. Electricity changes everything. Before, you could only light a few kerosene lamps. The whole room bathed in dim, yellow light, straining your eyes to see anything. Now you can put electric lights in every room. Turn them up as bright as you want. At last, you can read at night without worrying about ruining your eyes. The underground temperature is constant, but the air still gets stuffy sometimes. With electricity, you can install a small fan to circulate the air, making life even more comfortable. You buy a second-hand radio and set it on the shelf in the living room. Every night, you listen to news and music, the only link you have to the outside world, hearing about what's happening in faraway Sydney or Melbourne through the radio waves. The biggest change electricity brings is the refrigerator. Before, storing food was a nightmare. Meat had to be cured or dried. Vegetables rotted in days. Milk was an impossible dream. You lived on tinned food, dried goods, and pickles. Now, you have a real refrigerator. The underground is cool already, but the fridge goes below zero, freezing meat and storing iso-luxury in a place where the surface hits 50 degrees Celsius. When your wife pulls a frozen steak out of the fridge for the first time, you stare at it for a long time. "Is this real?" you ask. "Of course it's real," she smiles. "You can take a bite if you want." You don't bite it, but you think to yourself, Modern civilization is amazing. As electricity spreads, other modern amenities follow. Some people install televisions, small black and white screens with only a few channels. The picture often fuzzy, but enough to see what's happening in the world. Some get electric water heaters, no longer hauling buckets of water or boiling it on a stove just to bathe. A few even install simple air conditioners. The underground is cool already, but some people just like it colder. You sit in the living room with the lights on, listening to music from the radio. Your wife cooks in the kitchen on an electric stove, and the smell of food drifts over, and you suddenly feel it. Life is getting better, little by little, slowly but surely. You hear a knock not on a door, but on the rock. Hello, anyone home? I'd love to have a look around. You lift the curtain, and outside stands a middle-aged man in a floral shirt and sun hat, a camera in his hand, a pair of binoculars around his neck. A tourist. It's a day in the 1970s. Sometime, no one knows exactly when, Coober Pedy became a tourist attraction. You're not sure who first saw its tourist potential. Maybe a journalist wrote an article. Maybe a photographer took some pictures. One day, people from the outside world suddenly became fascinated by this underground city. At first, it was just a handful of backpackers, wandering around, asking strange questions. Aren't you bored underground? How do you go to the toilet? What if there's an earthquake? They'd take a few photos, then catch the next long-distance bus and leave. Then more and more tourists came, and someone spotted a business opportunity. The first underground home open to visitors was Stavros the Greek's place, the same man you met at the church years ago. His home is bigger than most and nicely decorated. He turned one room into an exhibition space, displaying opal samples and mining tools, and put a box at the entrance for coins visitors drop a few in to look around. You hesitate for a moment, then let the man in the floral shirt come in. He looks around the living room, exclaiming non-stop, "Wow, it's so cool in here. Oh my God, is that a real opal? You actually live here. Unbelievable." You make him a cup of tea and tell him a little about life underground. He listens enthralled, taking dozens of photos. When he leaves, he shoves a few coins into your hand. "For the tour. Thanks for having me." He walks away, and you stare at the coins in your hand, lost in thought. Tourism has brought big changes to Coober Pedy. Many residents make a more stable income from hosting tourists, selling souvenirs, and running underground hotels and restaurants than they ever did from mining. The town's infrastructure improves too, with better roads, more public facilities, even a small visitor center. But it has its downsides. You can no longer sit at the cave entrance sunbathing whenever you want. There's always a tourist popping up to take a photo. Some tourists have no manners, wandering into private homes without permission, angering the residents. And some people worry that tourism will ruin Coober Pedy's raw, authentic charm, turning it into a fake theme park. You close the curtain and head back to the living room, dropping the coins into a piggy bank, your third tour fee of the week. Life goes on, just with a few more onlookers. You stand at the cave entrance, looking out at the landscape, or what passes for it. A stretch of reddish-brown desert, no trees, no grass. The ground pockmarked with mounds of earth and holes from mining. Some people say it looks like the surface of the moon. You think the comparison is perfect. It's a day in the 2020s. You've lived here for decades. Your hair is white, your back a little stooped. But your cave is still your cave. Of course, it's much bigger now and far more modern. Internet, smartphones, video calls. Your grandson lives in Sydney, and you video chat with him every week. He always asks, "Grandpa, when are you going to move out?" It's so stuffy underground. You just smile and don't answer. Coober Pedy has a permanent population of about 2,000 now, far less than its peak. Many young people have left, heading to the cities, the coast, places with sunlight and green trees. Those who stay are mostly old-timers like you, and a few new immigrants, coming from all over the world, some to mine opals, some for tourism, some just to experience this unique way of life. Opals are still mined here, but it's nothing like the old days, when you could dig one up by chance and strike it rich. The surface deposits are mostly gone. To find good opals, you have to dig much deeper, with better equipment and more money. Many small miners have given up, selling their mining rights to big companies. Underground living is still the norm here. New homes aren't dug with shovels anymore. There are special excavators that can carve out hundreds of square meter space in a few days. The interiors are modern too. Tiled floors, painted rock walls, recessed lights, central air conditioning. If no one told you it was underground, you'd think you were walking into an apartment in a city. But the core magic of it never changes. The underground temperature still hovers at a constant 24 degrees Celsius. Above ground, it can be a 50-degree heat wave or a freezing 0-degree winter. But below, it's always comfortable. No air conditioner needed, no heater, just a single t-shirt all year round. It's still quiet underground too. Even if a sandstorm rages outside, you can sit here in peace, drinking tea and reading a book. That sense of isolated calm is something you can't find anywhere on the surface. And this place is full of stories. Every wall, every corner holds decades of memories. That lopsided shelf you put up in the 1970s, that faded rug you bought for your wedding, that small niche holding your grandfather's harmonica. Its reeds are broken now. You can't play it anymore, but you can't bear to throw it away. You were born here, grew up here, married here, raised your children here, and are growing old here. The shovel marks on the rock walls were made by you, your father, your grandfather, one shovelful at a time. As you turn and walk back into the cave, closing the curtain, the television is on, the news talking about rising house prices in the cities. You shake your head, thinking, city people are crazy, spending so much money on such tiny houses. You sit down in your underground living room and make yourself a cup of tea. Wooer's great-grandson, a dusty yellow mixed breed just like Wooer, curls up at your feet, dozing. Sunlight filters through a crack in the canvas curtain, drawing a thin golden line on the floor. You sip your tea, listening to the dog's slow breathing, and feel a deep, profound contentment.